Hey guys, welcome to my review of Nymphomaniac, the new Lars von Trier film. If you're wondering how I've seen it, I saw it at a special screening around the UK for one day on Saturday the 22nd of February, which involved playing both films back to back at a cinema and then having a live filmed Q&A session with Stellan Skarsgård and Stacey Martin, who is the main character in the film. I regard myself as a fan of Lars von Trier, and I've only seen Antichrist and Melancholia before this film. So the other two films in his Depression trilogy, which is what this is a part of, I've seen those as well, and I do rather like them. Antichrist, I think, is absolutely incredible and was very underrated and panned quite badly by the critics, and I don't really understand why. A lot of people thought it was misogynistic. I can see where they got the idea from, but I thought it was a lot deeper than that and a lot more interesting. Melancholia, again, I thought was a bit slow, but it has a completely different feel to Antichrist, and it also has a different feel to Nymphomaniac. But by far, I think the best film in this trilogy is Nymphomaniac. So we follow the story of Jo from her early years in life to the age of 50 after she gets taken in by Stellan Skarsgård's character Seligman, and she basically tells him chapters of her life which regard her sexuality, and she regards herself as a nymphomaniac or female sex addict, although she prefers the term nymphomaniac. She starts the film off by saying that she's a horrible person, she's sinned, and that's kind of crossed against the way that Seligman portrays his character. He is an asexual man who tends to be very logical and uses logic and reason to decide to kind of encourage Jo into thinking that she isn't evil and these events that she did weren't as bad as she thought they were, which is really, really interesting. So you have two different things, like you have a woman that's addicted to sex and a man that doesn't have sex, and there's that really nice kind of juxtaposition played against each other in voiceovers throughout the entire film. There's an awful lot of voiceover. One of my friends that went to see it with me said that if they removed all of the imagery from the film and just had the soundtrack and the voiceover, it'd still be a very, very effective experience. And in this film, Lars von Trier plays around with the soundtrack absolutely brilliantly. There are some beautiful pieces of music in there, as well as some like heavy metal, German heavy metal, which you may have recognised as being in the trailer, which is just incredible when that kicks in the film. I'm not going to spoil when it is, but when that kicks in, you know what kind of film you're in for. You kind of just get sucked into it and you sit there. The film itself, part one is 2 hours long, 1 hour and 58 minutes, but pretty much 2 hours long. That involves a lot of acting from younger Jo, who played by Stacey Martin. This is her first film. She's an incredible actress, and this is just an amazing, amazing performance. I will say that the performances in this film are absolutely superb from every single person within this film. I felt not a single actor in this film did a bad job, and that's saying something. There's one thing that I didn't like about it, and that was Shia LaBeouf's accent, which I'm sure a lot of people will be talking about. I just couldn't work out what the hell it was. Was it English, Australian, South African? It kind of changes. It didn't spoil the film, and his acting's actually really good in it, which also surprised me. So yeah, part one of the film has 5 different chapters. I won't spoil what the chapters' names are because that, you want to see it, but if you haven't already. But each chapter is done differently and each has their own individual style. The very first chapter is more to do with how, it kind of has references to how von Trier likes to make his films. We have beautiful imagery, different landscape shots, things like that, which you don't see until towards the end of the film. That kind of kicks back in, and it's just wonderful that he does that, because he's able. The images in his films are absolutely beautiful, which is completely juxtaposed with the things that are going on psychologically and mentally with all these characters in the film, and it goes against the story, but it's so beautiful. Another kind of hint of that would be the music in the film. As I've said, absolutely beautiful music, We also have references to his previous work like Melancholia and Antichrist. There are two very prominent references if you've seen both films in Nymphomaniac. As the chapters progress, we go through her life, which is incredible because this Stacey Martin does an absolutely wonderful job of portraying the character from the age of 15 all the way up until about 30, I think, and then Charlotte Gainsbourg takes control. That's more of the second half of the film. The first half of the film is a lot more playful than the second half. The first one is incredibly dense, full of information. Stellan Skarsgård's character continuously gives information and pauses Joe's story to give you interesting insights into different theoretical standpoints that he's read up on. Like, he brings fly fishing into it, he brings the Fibonacci sequence into it. Everything is kind of very intricately put in, and it all makes sense, which allows you to think about the film as you're watching it, especially with some of the techniques that are used within the film. Like Melancholia and Antichrist, and possibly a lot of his other films, the editing is rather like the kind of editing used by Jean-Luc Godard. You know, it kind of cuts as they're speaking instead of what the action is. That kind of takes you out of it being film, but I do think that that is incredibly, like, purposefully intentional. There is a lot of things going on in the film that aren't just to do with the story, that you have to think about and relate to each individual character, what they're going through, how this reflects in your opinions, your own philosophies, your own ideas about life, how it all comes together. So yeah, this is by far one of the most interesting films I've ever seen. It's incredibly dense. The first half, as I've said, is very playful. The film itself is actually incredibly funny. There are a lot of very funny scenes in the film that you don't expect to be funny. I mean, I didn't find any of Antichrist to be funny, and I didn't find any of Melancholia, I don't think, to be funny. But a lot of the scenes in Nymphomaniac will have very funny, subtle dialogue, and it will be very, like, not forced humour, but it's just there, and it's perfectly done, perfectly read by all of the characters. It kind of refreshes you in a sense that you've just watched a lot of sex happening on a screen, and then that kicks in and you've forgotten about that and you're instantly in another zone, and it just brings you, the humour kind of takes you out of the film, but that's by far not a bad thing at all. There is one amazing performance in the film by Uma Thurman, who you may have seen in the trailer. She plays an absolutely amazing character. I'm not going to spoil it at all, but that segment of the film was driven by her and what she does in it. It was absolutely brilliantly done. But yeah, there's a lot of different techniques used in this film. There's use of, I don't know what it's called, but the screen will come up with a picture of a diagram that one of the characters talking about, or will give you more information about a topic you may not know about, which is very interesting. That's more in the first half of the film, which is really, like, as I've said, it's dense. But I do like how it's actually made into two films. When I watched it, there was a 15-minute interval in between both films, which allowed you to kind of deconstruct what you had just seen in the first half, and then allow you to be back in the second half of the film with all those ideas happening in your brain, and then being hit with what happens in the second half of the film. So part 2 is again about 2 hours long. I did see the 4-hour cut version of the film, not the 5.5 hour that I think was premiered at Berlin. But yeah, I saw the 4-hour version of the film. I don't think I need to see the 5-hour, although it might actually add a bit more character to one of the characters you meet later in the story, which I'm not going to discuss because it might spoil it if I do. The second half of the film is quite different in style from the first half. It kind of shook me because the first half of the film is playful, very fast-paced. You're hardly bored at all. If you are, it's because you're thinking about what's happening instead of what's actually going on screen. And the second half comes in and it just hits you with, this is where Charlotte Gainsbourg kind of takes control of the plot when she plays the older version of Joe. And this version is absolutely brilliant. Like, she plays the character absolutely perfectly. To a point where she no longer is Charlotte Gainsbourg, she is Joe, which is one of the best things that actors, like, when you see a good actor, that's who they are. They are the character, not the actual actor themselves. But yeah, it was absolutely brilliant performance. Some very, very harrowing scenes in part 2. Yeah, the film itself is quite full of a lot of sex. But that isn't a bad thing when we're talking about a woman who's addicted to sex. And the sex scenes that are done in the film are incredibly tasteful. There is not a lot of it is done just for shock value. There is a rather hardcore BDSM scene and kind of theme that goes off in the film, which you may or may not enjoy. I didn't mind it. I thought it was very interesting what was happening, and how that led to why the character was led to be going there. Obviously, you can kind of put it together. If you've seen the trailer, then you probably know, and if you've heard about this film and are watching this review, you've probably seen the trailer, because you'd be interested in the Lars von Trier film and the new one. So yeah, I can't recommend this film enough. I went into the cinema incredibly hyped for it, expecting something amazing, and what I got was something that was almost perfect. This is one of the best films I have ever seen, and it's one of the most interesting films I have ever experienced in a cinema. At the end of the film, the audience stood up and clapped the film. I don't agree with clapping a screen, I don't really see the point of it, but I kind of like the fact that nearly every single person in the audience respected that film as an art, and it is an art form. It was absolutely beautifully, the whole film finishes on such an amazing point. I'm not going to spoil it at all, but the way the film starts and it finishes is almost mysterious, but the ending of the film had me rattled for a while, and then I had to think about the rest of the film in relation to it. I will be needing to see this film again, but these are just my first thoughts and kind of my first review. This is one of my favourite films now. I think a lot of people should see this film who aren't familiar with art films or this kind of genre of film or the director at all. I think a lot of people should try something new and watch Nymphomaniac, because it's a perfect example of a really, really good art house film. Personally, obviously I really, really enjoyed it. I give this film honestly a 10 out of 10. I'm still thinking about what happened in the film, what it means, all the different notions and ideas, and I'm still exploring in my mind how good this film is. It's so full of information that you can literally cut it with a knife. You could take a chunk out of the film, go away, research it heavily, come back, and the film would mean something different. And I think that's what Lars von Trier's managed to do with this amazing piece of cinema. Go check it out. I've tried very hard not to spoil anything in this review. If you do want a review with spoilers, I would be able to make one of those, and I will put the link in the description for the trailer. And thank you very much for watching this review of Nymphomaniac by Lars von Trier. I hope you enjoy the film as much as I did.